What have we learned from these prequels that Romulus, Alien Romulus, which comes out in August, can avoid to make it successful? Now, Patrick, we've talked a lot over these two films about the mistakes made for Prometheus, and even though we both had a bit of a turnaround on Alien Covenant, to where we're going to leave this podcast saying this is actually a pretty decent movie. Not great, pretty good, but still flawed. And Prometheus was incredibly flawed. So what does Alien Romulus need to do to avoid the pitfalls of these two films?
We have talked at length, Damon, so I'm going to keep it quick. Get to the horror. And guess what? They hired the right guy for that. Fede Alvarez gets right to the horror. And he's even quoted as saying, what I wanted to do with Romulus was get right back to being a horror film right away. I think he established it in those trailers very clearly. I don't think we're going to be waiting too long. From what I can tell, it looks like we're already on LV-426. We know what happens there. So we're going to get to the horror quick. If you do that, you have a movie that's pretty successful. Even the horror elements of Prometheus were kind of decent. It was just a nonsensical story. The story had a lot of problems. But when when Covenant kicked in to its horror, it just got exponentially better. So get right to the horror. Don't fuck around. Guess what other movies didn't fuck around? Alien didn't fuck around, got right to the horror. It just did. Now, we know Aliens is more of an action movie, so it's different. Okay, so we give that a different leeway. It's more world building. And we all recognize that, all the hardcore fans of the franchise recognize you don't compare Alien and Aliens. They're two different things. But Alien 3 got right back to the horror right again. It started horrifically. It was like, oh God, Newton Hicks are dead? What? Violently dead. And then the horror kicks off like pretty quickly. So I think that's the winning formula here. And I do think Romulus is very much on that path. If they get straight to the horror, we're going to have a successful film.
So my version of how do you make this successful is story-wise. And that is, don't mess with the mythology. Don't mess with the story to where it's going to somehow interfere with Alien, which we know this story takes place between Alien and Aliens. That's the timeline of this. Don't mess with that. Part of my biggest problem ultimately with Prometheus and then going into Alien Covenant is they just spent way too much time trying to explain the xenomorphs and the David thing. It just got way too complicated, and I didn't need all that. Part of what made the xenomorphs so terrifying is we didn't know about them. We didn't know where they came from. We didn't know what their purpose was. We just know when they're around, you have a real low likelihood of surviving. You pretty much told me what you think the story of Romulus is going to be, and now that I've seen that second trailer, unwillingly, by the way, I saw it in the theater, I had no way to avoid it. I agree with you that this is an extension of LV-426, which is the planet they land on in Aliens. But the idea of, and again, we may be totally wrong because we don't really know.
We don't know.
But from hearing the interviews I've read with Fede Alvarez, which have not been spoiler interviews, obviously, because the movie's not out yet, he doesn't want to mess with the mythology. He doesn't want to inject a new actor to play Ripley as like a young Ripley, and she somehow met the aliens on this ship and then just totally like forgot about it 57 years later when she wakes up in Aliens or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's not making that movie to where he's interrupting that 57-year journey between Alien and Aliens, and they find Ripley, and Ripley stops the aliens again, but then goes back into hypersleep and completely forgets about it. He's not doing that. And you know there's some version of some story where someone would try to do that. It doesn't seem like he's going there. So in that regard, as long as you don't mess with perfection, Alien and Aliens are as close as you can get to two totally perfect films, totally different films, but two virtually perfect movies. As long as you don't mess with that, then let's just go. Let's go. I'm in.